ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਇਨਫੋਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਜਸਲੀਨ ਕੌਰ। ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਐਪੀਸੋਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਰੇਸ ਦੀ। ਫੈਡਰਲ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਮੌਜੂਦਾ ਲੀਡਰ ਐਂਡਰਿਊ ਸ਼ੀਅਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕੁਝ ਮਹੀਨਿਆਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਅਹੁਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਅਸਤੀਫਾ ਦੇਣ ਦਾ ਐਲਾਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਜਿਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਹੁਣ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਲੀਡਰ ਦੀ ਮੁੜ ਤੋਂ ਚੋਣ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਨਵਾਂ ਲੀਡਰ 21 ਅਗਸਤ ਤੱਕ ਚੁਣ ਲਿਆ ਜਾਏਗਾ। ਇਸ ਲਈ ਫਿਲਹਾਲ 4 ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਚੋਣ ਮੈਦਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਨ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਹਨ ਡਰਹਮ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ एरिन ओटूल, जो कि विस्तार ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਲਾਈਨ ਤੇ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹਨ। Hello MP Erin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining PDC Punjabi.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. I would like to start with your plan for Canada. Tell me, what's your plan for Canada and what will be your #1 priority?
My top priority will be to get the country working again after COVID-19. We need to save small business. Many small businesses were left out of the COVID programming by the Trudeau government. Many didn't get rent assistance. Many didn't qualify for loans. So we need to save small business. And then we need all sectors of the private sector firing on all cylinders. So energy, resources, forestry, manufacturing in Ontario. We need to get better trade deals. And we need to bring some manufacturing home to Canada to make sure we can have critical supplies for medical supplies, these things. So the economy really needs to be the focus. We have to keep taxes low, get our books back in order, but Canadians really need to be working, and that's going to be the focus of the Conservative government.
I did go through your election platform and I did see that you mentioned that you will be working on agriculture, economy, law and order, climate change, gun law and immigration and other things too. So I'll start with the immigration. We know that Canada is known as a land of growth and opportunities, and immigrants contribute a lot to Canadian economy. So what do you think, what changes you can bring to the immigration system?
Well, first off, we have to fix some of the delays and problems we've seen in the Trudeau government. In fact, some of the issues at the border in Quebec, we've had 60,000 people enter Canada illegally and overwhelm the system. So the system now has delays in it, and some of the family reunification has been done by lottery and other things that doesn't seem to be fair in many cases. So what I want to do is fix the system, and in the next few years we may have to do more family reunification, given the fact that the more family supports you have, families are able to come up with childcare and other solutions, which we saw during COVID. If there's school closures or daycare closures, we need more family supports to help the parents work. So I think for the next few years, we may have to adjust to have more family reunification to help families in the COVID era, and probably a little less skilled immigration because there may be high levels of employment. So we need the immigration system. It's a positive for Canada, as you say, but we also may need to make sure it meets the needs of the country, particularly coming out of COVID.
But don't you think Liberal government is already working on family reunification and childcare support?
Well, there are the programs in it, but in many cases, the wait times for family reunification are longer. And in some cases, they're run by a lottery system, sort of a random approach. That's not a strategic approach to immigration. I think if there's the ability for a family sponsorship to help families cope with care for a young person or care for an elderly family, they need to be given higher priority and not just put into a randomized selection. We're also seeing delays created because of the border crossings in Quebec, which have been overwhelming the system. We have to make sure that we have a smart, effective, and rules-based system. And I really want to make sure that families have a shorter wait time to sponsor their loved ones.
MP, in talking about the law and order, you also said that you will invoke the notwithstanding clause to impose the mandatory sentences for serious crimes. Why do you think this is an appropriate use of the notwithstanding clause?
Well, I think in a criminal justice context, whenever someone has committed serious violence against another Canadian, I think our society needs to send a signal that that's not tolerated. And in fact, a mandatory minimum sentence is appropriate for serious crimes like murder, attempted murder, violent sexual assaults, crimes against children. I think there has to be a basic expectation of a minimum sentence. And Parliament is permitted to give that clarity to the courts. So when there's a property-based crime or something like theft or something minor, that's where the court should have more discretion with respect to the length of the sentence. But I think society needs to send a signal that we have zero tolerance for people who prey on children, people who bring violence into our communities, and a mandatory minimum is a way to do that.
But where do you draw the line for this?
I draw the line right there. I've specified exactly in my platform where I would use the notwithstanding clause. And here's what a lot of people don't understand. Quebec has used the notwithstanding clause many, many times. Saskatchewan has used the clause. We would have no constitution if it were not for a notwithstanding clause. That was a requirement the provinces wanted. So I would not use it all the time, but I think it's best to be honest with people. Parliament should be the final determinant on issues like criminal justice.
But will you use it to overturn the human's right?
Pardon me?
Will you use it to overturn the human's right?
No, no.
What if your party wants to reopen the debate on abortion? How will you deal with it?
We don't want to. In fact, I've supported rights for women. I've supported LGBT rights all my time as a member of parliament. So we won't be reopening. The government, a conservative government, would not reopen abortion or same-sex marriage or anything like that. In fact, I voted in favor of things like that while Justin Trudeau skipped votes to go to fundraisers. So I stand up for rights, and I think we can do that. And the notwithstanding clause should never be used to remove a right away from a Canadian. I've said that clearly, but the notwithstanding clause can be used in the criminal justice system for these serious violent offenses.
MP Aaron, moving on to the new gun ban law, which Liberals brought. So after Nova Scotia shooting, Liberals banned 1,500 weapons. I know that you're opposing it. What do you think? Why you said that this is politicizing the tragedy?
Well, it is. There's no debates in the House of Commons. And after a terrible tragedy like this, the Prime Minister sends a signal suggesting that hunters and sport shooters are the problem. The Prime Minister is actually lying to Canadians. The terrible shooting in Nova Scotia was done with illegally smuggled guns. Trudeau's ignoring that problem completely. It's part of the reason they were not going to have a federal inquiry. And then there was huge outrage, even from their own Liberal MPs, so they reversed themselves. Why did they not want to have an inquiry? It's because this person smuggled illegal weapons, and that has been easier to do under Justin Trudeau. Our border is not as secure after 4 or 5 years of Justin Trudeau. We've seen that with illegal people crossing the border, but there's been an increase in smuggling of drugs and weapons. So Trudeau's actually let the problem get worse. Then he suggests the problem is hunters and sports shooters. It's divisive and it's incompetent. It's time to start fixing the problems, not creating new ones like Trudeau does.
MP Aaron, we will definitely continue this chat, but right after a short break. Welcome back. After the break, we have in conversation with us the Conservative leadership candidate and the Member Parliament from Durham, Erin O'Toole. MP Aaron, climate change was a big issue in last elections. What action Conservatives will take for fighting the climate change under your leadership?
Well, it is something that we have to show Canadians we have a serious approach to that is not a tax-based approach. So Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals love to tax people across the board on everything. And the carbon tax actually doesn't reduce emissions. Their own reports show that. So I would eliminate the carbon tax, but I would show that we need to work with the provinces who are reducing the emissions for some of their larger industrial emitters. Each province does it a little bit differently. So we have to respect the provincial lead in this area, and the federal government can partner with the provinces to get emissions down, and we can work on improving transportation and other regulations to actually produce fewer emissions nationally, and that will be my goal, and I've talked about it consistently for the last few years.
MP Aaron, we also know about the health crisis across Canada. So how do you plan to work with the provinces and territories to support the mental health crisis across Canada?
Yes, I think we have to be a partner. As I said on climate change, for example, there are some areas where the federal government should actually be the partner to the provinces who take the lead. Healthcare, long-term care for seniors, these are provincial programs, but can we partner? Can we make sure that some of our large infrastructure funds are made available for improvements to seniors' long-term care, for example? Because we've seen that as a top priority in this. I was actually calling for the military to be used to help with our health and long-term care systems in March, and the Liberals made fun of me. And then a month and a half later, the provinces were asking for the military. So we have to learn the lessons, and I think the federal government can be a funding partner as the provinces improve their systems, and particularly long-term care.
Talking about the current situation, we know that we are facing real concerns right now due to coronavirus outbreak. We see the impact on the economy. What do you think, how Liberals have handled it?
Well, they were slow, both slow at the beginning. You know, the Conservatives, we were asking them to stop flights from China in late January. I was asking for this to happen in February for flights from Iran, Italy, and others. That is what we have to do, is be faster so that fewer cases come into Canada. So they were slow. They didn't even close the border until mid-March. And for months, they were saying closing the border wouldn't help. Now we still have the border closed. So what type of message were they sending? The other thing, they were slow on the economic response too. And that's why many jobs were not saved. They first suggested a 10% wage subsidy. We said to them, no one is going to protect a job for just 10% subsidy. They had to introduce a second bill to bring it up to 75. So what the government did is they didn't save as many jobs as they could have, and more Canadians are on the emergency response, the CERB, than needed. It's going to cause a huge employment crisis over the next few months. And so we're going to focus on tackling that employment issue, getting the economy moving again, and supporting all parts of the economy: energy, resources, manufacturing, small business. We need people to work in this country.
How do you plan to prepare Canada for future outbreaks?
Well, we have to be faster in response. So, as I said, when we were asking for the border to be closed at the end of January to flights from China, if the Liberals had listened, we might have had an experience like New Zealand or Taiwan or Australia with far fewer cases. So we have to move much faster to restrict and control flights and entry. We have to continue to watch the US border. And then we have to build up our own supplies of domestic PPE and other items so that we're not scrambling like we were last time. I've been working with Premier Ford and his government on bringing mask manufacturing to Ontario back from China. So certain things, I think we have to have that domestic capacity ready to go right away, and be much, much more careful on the border and restricting travel, and making sure we can keep the economy as open as possible using a combination of distancing, sanitation, and masks. I think we've learned a lot from the first wave, and we have to make sure we use that if there is a second wave.
Absolutely. Another topic I want to discuss is the We Charity scandal, which is right now a big issue. We know that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under ethics investigation for the third time, and Conservative Party is asking for the police investigation. What do you want to say on this?
Well, I think we feel it's worth looking into whether there's a breach of trust somewhere in this scandal. Because remember, the Parliament of Canada was not sitting properly. The Liberals weren't funding the Auditor General, and they were spending literally hundreds of billions of dollars over 5 months with no oversight. And the We scandal makes it appear like Bill Morneau and the Prime Minister and people in his office were actually helping Liberal-friendly charities, as opposed to running a competition and actually having the best people put forward bids. Were they helping their friends, much like in the SNC-Lavalin scandal, his second ethics violation where a liberal-friendly company was lobbying to reverse the decision of Jody Wilson-Raybould. You remember that scandal. It always seems that with the Liberals, their insider friends get better treatment than regular Canadians. And I think it's outrageous, and we have to hold them to account.
What do you think where this story can go?
I think that Bill Morneau will need to resign in the next week or two. The Prime Minister's testimony and his Chief of Staff confirmed that the entire idea came from Bill Morneau. Here's what's crazy about the whole thing. They were already spending billions of dollars to have students go onto the CERB program. Who came up with a program to spend almost $1 billion more to pay volunteers? Volunteering is usually done out of goodwill, out of altruism, sometimes out of religious devotion and faith. Why did they come up with a plan to do this when they were already putting students on the CERB benefit? It clearly came from Bill Morneau, is what Katie Telford said. And then he had taken that trip. He had family working there. The Prime Minister was close. It is totally inappropriate. So I think Bill Morneau has to go. He doesn't have the confidence of most people in the House, including many Liberals. And I think the Prime Minister should really hold himself to account because this is his third ethics investigation. It's simply unacceptable for our Prime Minister to not have the character to hold himself responsible for his actions.
Right. Coming back to your leadership race, what do you think, where do you need more seats? How will you grow the party voters?
Well, we simply need to win where we've won before, but the biggest area where we need seats is Ontario, Southern Ontario, the Greater Toronto area. I'm a Conservative MP from the Durham region in the GTA. But right now, there's only 6 Conservatives in a region with 60 seats. So we have to win there. And what's exciting, I would be the first leader of the Conservative Party from the GTA ever. I'd be the first leader from Ontario since the 1940s. And so it's time for us to have a principled, true blue Conservative, but somebody that has a track record of winning in the GTA. And I've been reaching out, and we've got a great team across Mississauga, Brampton, throughout Peel, throughout Halton, throughout Durham, and in the 416. I really think we can win, and we've got to rebuild our relationship with a lot of communities across the GTA, and that will be my top priority.
But why do you think you are the right choice for Canada?
Well, I'm in the House of Commons ready to go now. So of the top 3 candidates in this race, I'm the only one who's a member of Parliament. I think that's critical. We have the deficit, we have high unemployment, we have the WE scandal. We need a leader to hold Mr. Trudeau to account on day one. I can do that. And I've also got the most experience out of everyone in this race. I was in the Canadian Armed Forces as an Air Force officer for 12 years. I worked in the private sector for 10 years, including on trade with one of the biggest companies in the world, Procter & Gamble. And I was in cabinet with Stephen Harper and turned around a very difficult portfolio. I'm a politician that hasn't been here my whole life. I have real world experience and I get things done. So I build great teams. I set out a vision on what we need to do as a country, and we're going to achieve that vision. Canada is a great country. We need to do better, and it will do better under the Conservatives.
MP Aaron, how do you plan to run your election campaign with the physical distancing measures still in place?
Well, I'll be doing a lot of Skype interviews like this, Yasleen, and I've done probably around 500 Zoom meetings with thousands of people from across the country. I was touring a small business and a couple restaurants that were reopening in Brampton and in Durham in the last week. Obviously, we wear masks and we take the social distancing rules very seriously. We keep our crowds small or do things outside. So we're adjusting in this race. And I think an election, which could come in the next 6 months, we will have to adjust these same rules for a general election. The good thing is everyone has to follow the rules. The Conservatives, the Liberals, the NDP, the Green. I think putting the public health and the priority of Canadians first will be important. It will be a different way of campaigning, but we've already learned how to do it during this leadership race.
All right. Thank you, MP Aaron, for joining PTC Punjabi and sharing all this information with us. We wish you good luck. Thank you and hope to see you soon. ਸੋ ਇਨਫੋਕਸ ਦੇ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਐਪੀਸੋਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਖਾਸ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਡਰਹਮ ਰੀਜਨ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਅਤੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਰੇਸ ਦੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ एरन ओटूल दे नाल। जे तुहाडा कोई विचार है या फिर सवाल है तो साडे नाल साझा करना चाहते हो तो सानू जरूर लिख के भेजो feedback@ptcnetwork.com ते। फिलहाल मैनू दिओ इजाजत अते देश दुनिया दीआं ताज़ा खबरां लई तुसीं वेखदे रहो PTC न्यूज़।